Good Thursday morning, everyone. Welcome on into your FreightWaves Now Community Spotlight on this Thursday. I'm Kaylee Nix. Joining me is Thomas Watson, host of the one and only Loaded and Rolling. Thomas, how are you on this fine Thursday?
Oh, living the dream. It's Throwback Thursday, so I was coming up with a bunch of fun stuff. And one of the fun topics is truck parking drama, which has been around since the invention of things to park on the parking lots.
Do you think that the ancient Greeks and ancient Romans had chariot parking drama? Is that something that they were dealing with back then too?
Oh, yes. The ancient Romans, they loved their chariots so much that they actually had riots. They had red, blue, and green teams, and you'd go to the chariot races. So you imagine what would happen if you're a Reds fan and you parked at maybe the chariot spot that was for the blue folks.
Yeah, it'd be a lot of horsehair flying around there. But let's talk about it in today's context, because as we know, truck parking is kind of a sensitive topic, especially if you talk to drivers or if you talk to people who are in charge of divvying out funding from a federal or state level. Let's talk a little bit about this, about what's going on in the truck parking space and why people are still having to fight the good fight to find truckers simply just a place to park.
Definitely. And it's something that's interesting because I see this a lot in trucker social media. What'll happen is one group will try to make something useful, but as with any kind of economics, it has to find a way to make money. So a truck parking club is a business and company that helps companies that do not have truck parking monetize it, turn this thing into a form of truck parking, or places that already have it existing, turn some of it into parking. So it's kind of it's a twofer. But I've noticed lately there's a pushback with some on social media because for the truckers themselves, they feel that, I should have free parking. I shouldn't be charged for parking. But also they forget the whole fundamental thing of, well, they're not paying for the business in the place that they happen to be parking on. It's that one of those tragedy of the commons situations. It has been glorious on the X platform, which is typically a cesspool, but every once in a while some nuggets float to the top in the porcelain throne.
That's how I think about street parking, right? As a commuter, just because you have the ability to find free parking somewhere doesn't mean that you're always going to want to go to the inconvenience of finding that free parking and walking or driving around and looking for it. But it's still there, right? It's just a choice of, can you find it? Do you care enough to find it or not? And am I going to settle with paying the $2.35 per hour at the street meter? Thank you, City of Chattanooga, that has upped that price in the last year or so. But it's kind of a bigger question, right? Is how much should that handshake between publicly available truck parking versus privately payable truck parking be? Is there a delicate balance, or do we get to a point where everything is paid and like your streaming services, you're just on a subscription model for it?
Well, it's kind of a seesaw effect, because if you look at it throughout history and we zoom out a little bit, the roads and infrastructures, even in before kind of the 17 and 1800s, you think of toll roads. Why are there turnpikes? Well, it's because back in the day when we didn't have as much, efficiency and consolidation of government and state apparatuses, you had private ventures having to maintain this infrastructure. And we still see these toll roads exist. We're actually starting to see more of them because, their infrastructure is a lot more expensive, and that a gas tax is not magically getting any better with the advention of electric vehicles. But it's fascinating to watch because we do see a situation in trucking where trucking is in one of those spots, just like with motorists. Let's say Chattanooga, for instance. I would like to park downtown, but I don't want to pay more taxes. So I don't want to pay more taxes means I don't get more parking infrastructure, but then I complain at the private company that pays the money to make the infrastructure and charges me to park, but they take that money to obviously build more parking locations and pay their staff. Trucking has the same thing. There's this fascinating thing where truckers will, they have a very, very important job, but trucking themselves can't even afford the parking for their drivers. So all these small fleets owner operators have to use private companies. Think of your pilots, your Love's Travel Centers. All these locations provide parking as an accessory to try to get them to go in the convenience store. So it's such a fascinating thing because when you see groups trying to do something that involves monetization, there's always a subset of people who said, well, you're just charging me more money now. And now my meal is $20 to eat and $20 to park. I can't believe it. I was like, well, you are having that challenge, but also it has incentivized folks to, add more parking that you would not have had because they want to make money. So it's always this thing with economics. You have two groups of people. One group doesn't understand how incentives work. If you want more of something, you have to incentivize it. And how are they incentivized? Making money. I mean, the truck driver themselves wouldn't be driving a truck unless they were not incentivized to do that kind of job to make money as well. So that is a fascinating thing to watch on social media.
There you go. Economics 101 coming to an X platform near you. Let's move on to this week's episode of Loaded and Rolling. It was a pretty good one. You had a special guest on from Fleetworthy. Talk to us about it.
It's with Mike Pritchett, President and Chief Strategy Officer of Fleetworthy Solutions, and it talks about the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration's Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. But on the website, it just says you can refer to it as the Clearinghouse, which makes it a lot easier and saves me quite a bit of breath in typing. So for folks who don't understand, Uncle Sam decided, well, you get drug tests. That's the first thing, drug and alcohol testing. It happens in about 3 ways. 1, before you get hired at a company as a CDL holder, you need to take a drug and alcohol test. 2, you get randomly inspected to do it. Typically, if you're a large fleet or a small fleet, a percentage of your fleet needs to have a random performed just to make sure you're compliant. And then finally, if you get in an accident. Now, if anyone dies, it doesn't matter if you're cited. Gotta get tested. Sorry, folks, it just happens. But for things such as accidents and injuries where a vehicle was towed or a person was injured and hospitalized, if you are cited, you definitely need to get the DOT drug and alcohol screen. Now, if you weren't cited, there's a handy chart on the website in my newsletter that tells you when and when not to do it. But typically, most fleets like to get drug tests regardless.
We know that there's been some kind of controversy around the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse from a legislation side recently. Did Mr. Pritchett give any indication on where they sit with their advice there?
There is some controversy because state CDL issuers, the state DMV, they're also looking at the clearinghouse data. This data is becoming more available to everyone. And if you do get like a DUI or something, you basically get put in a no-no zone. You have to go through a substance abuse program that will require different steps. And then after you've passed it, you need to take a test to get back to work. And after you get back to work, you can take like 6 more randoms over the course of a year. It's a lot of work. The challenge is that, you get the scarlet letter, the old A for adulterer back in the day. Well, this is kind of like a scarlet letter for trucking, some have argued, because the challenge is, imagine that I decide to, urinate hot on a drug test and get fired. Now I have this issue where I'm placed out of status. I got to go back and I got to figure out how to get back into the status where I can drive. Well, I can't do it with a company. And so is another company going to hire me and pay all that extra stuff for the SAP or the substance abuse professional? I know they're called SAPs. I know, it's hilarious. But, that's a very big thing. I've talked to Charles Gracie about this as well. It's almost like, imagine you want to adopt an animal, but you actually have to pay more than if you went to a private breeder.
It's interesting to see for sure. Thomas, as far as next week goes, we will all be at the Future of Supply Chain down in Atlanta, Georgia. You've got a bunch on your plate, from hosting the resurgence of FreightWaves Now with Grace Sharkey to a couple of Loaded and Rolling episodes. What are you looking forward to the most?
I get to catch up with Brent Hutto, Chief Relationship Officer at Truck Stop. So that's always a fun topic to talk about. Good people over there. And I'm not just saying that because I use their load board. Brent's actually a really awesome guy if you happen to meet him. So all the haters on social media, find other ways to get your impressions, my friends. But it's going to be a really good thing. I'll be working the registration booth in addition to with Grace Sharkey. These are fun events, really good stuff.
So you still have time to go purchase those tickets. Head on over to live.freightwaves.com if you haven't gotten them yet. We would love to see you guys down there in Atlanta. And you know what? It's always going to be a good time. And I'm excited to be there. Thomas, I'm excited to see your smiling face as well at that FreightWaves Now stage. And we will catch up with you down there in Atlanta next week.
Looking forward to it.